In a crowded station where no one was listening, a little girl chose silence. Her hand trembled, her eyes begged, and fear wrapped around her like a shadow too heavy for someone so small. A man watched. A grandmother pretended not to notice. And a broken veteran, still carrying the weight of war, stood at the edge of the crowd, ready to walk away. Then a dog stopped. One silent signal shattered the night. A gunshot echoed, a body fell, and in the chaos, loyalty, courage, and love collided, turning fear into hope, silence into a voice, and a moment of darkness into a miracle no one would ever forget. Harbor Point Union Station never truly slept. Even late at night, the building breathed. Through echoing announcements, rolling suitcases, and the steady hum of distant trains pulling in and out like restless giants. Ethan Walker stood just inside the main concourse, slightly off to the side where the light didn't hit too hard. He preferred it that way. The faded multicam jacket on his shoulders had seen better years. The fabric was worn soft at the elbows, the edges frayed in places that told quiet stories no one ever asked about. On his head sat a weathered cap stitched with simple white letters, U.S. Army Veteran. Two metal dog tags rested against his chest, occasionally tapping together when he shifted his weight. The watch on his left wrist was oversized, matte black, military issue, still set 5 minutes fast, the way he'd kept it overseas. Old habits didn't die. They just learned to stay quiet. Ethan's eyes scanned the station without looking like he was scanning at all. He wasn't searching for danger. He never did. But years of war had trained his body to notice the smallest things. The way crowds moved. The way sound changed when tension crept in. The way certain silences felt wrong. At his side sat Rex. The German shepherd didn't lie down like a pet. He sat upright, shoulders square, posture disciplined. His coat was a rich mix of dark brown and black, thick and well-kept. Around his neck was not a decorative collar, but a tactical collar, worn smooth from use. The name Rex stitched cleanly into the fabric. His ears were erect. His gaze never wandered far from Ethan. To anyone passing by, Rex might have looked calm. To Ethan, that calm meant readiness. They had been through too much together for Ethan to mistake it for relaxation. Ethan wasn't on duty. He didn't have a badge. He wasn't supposed to be responsible for anyone tonight. He was just a man waiting for a train. Across the concourse, a small girl walked beside her grandmother. The child couldn't have been more than 5 or 6. She wore a bright yellow sweater that stood out against the station's gray stone and steel like a drop of sunlight that didn't belong indoors. Her shoes made soft tapping sounds against the polished floor, each step measured, careful, too careful. Her grandmother held her hand firmly, not roughly, but with the protective grip of someone who had learned long ago that the world could change in an instant. The older woman's hair was silver, pulled back neatly, her coat buttoned all the way to the top despite the mild temperature inside the station. She smiled as she spoke to the girl, lips moving gently, reassuringly. The girl didn't answer. She didn't look up. Her eyes stayed fixed on the floor, as if she were counting the tiles, or afraid that if she looked anywhere else, something bad might happen. Ethan noticed her without meaning to. He told himself it was nothing. Kids got tired. Kids zoned out. Long travel days did that. Still, something tugged at him. Rex noticed her too. The dog's head shifted just slightly, barely enough for anyone else to see. His ears angled forward, not aggressively, not playfully, just alert. His breathing slowed. Ethan felt the change through the leash before he consciously registered it. "Easy," he murmured under his breath. Rex didn't move. The grandmother guided the girl toward one of the benches near the departure boards. She adjusted the child's sleeve, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. "We'll sit here for a minute, sweetheart," she said softly. "Just until they call our train." The girl nodded once. That was all. She sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, shoulders drawn in, as if trying to make herself smaller. Rex's eyes never left her. Ethan shifted his stance, angling his body slightly, not toward the girl, but toward the open space behind her. It was a habit he hated admitting he still had. Positioning, lines of sight, exits, war thinking. He caught himself and exhaled slowly. "You're not there anymore." Still, Rex stayed locked in, not barking, not pulling, just watching. Ethan followed the line of Rex's gaze, and then he saw him. A man stood near one of the large concrete pillars, half-shadowed by the overhead lights. Mid-30s, maybe early 40s, clean jacket, neutral expression. Nothing about him screamed danger. Nothing about him screamed safe either. The man's attention flicked, not at Ethan, not at Rex, but toward the bench where the girl sat. Just a glance, quick, calculated. Then his eyes returned to his phone. Ethan felt a familiar tightness in his chest. He'd seen that look before. Not in training manuals, not in briefing rooms, in real life. The look of someone checking distance. Rex's tail lowered a fraction. Ethan's fingers tightened on the leash. The girl shifted on the bench. Her grandmother leaned closer, whispering something meant only for her. The girl nodded again, but this time her hand moved. It was small, almost invisible. Her fingers curled inward, then loosened. Her thumb tucked against her palm. 2 fingers extended briefly, then folded back in. The motion lasted less than a second. No one around them reacted. No one except Rex. The dog's body went rigid. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He knew that signal. He hadn't seen it on a battlefield, but he'd learned about it after coming home, in community safety workshops, in quiet briefings meant to teach civilians how to survive when words weren't safe. A silent plea. "I need help." Ethan swallowed hard. Rex let out a low sound. Not a growl, not a bark, recognition. The girl didn't look at Ethan, she didn't look at Rex. But her small shoulders trembled, and for the first time since Ethan had noticed her, she lifted her eyes, not toward the crowd, not toward her grandmother, but straight toward Rex. Just for a moment. Long enough to ask a question she couldn't speak. Long enough to hope someone was listening. Ethan felt the weight of a choice settle onto him like a rucksack he thought he'd put down years ago. He didn't want trouble. But trouble had just found him anyway. And Rex. Rex was already standing. Rex stood. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't dramatic. It was the kind of movement only someone who had spent years beside him would notice. A controlled rise, muscles tightening beneath thick fur, weight shifting forward just enough to change the air around him. Ethan felt it through the leash before he saw it. "Rex," he murmured, not as a command, but as a question. The German shepherd didn't look back. His ears were locked forward now, rigid, slicing through the noise of the station. His eyes stayed fixed on the bench where the girl sat, small hands clenched in her lap, yellow sleeves pulled down over her wrists as if she were cold. Ethan's pulse slowed instead of racing. That too was an old habit. When things went wrong, panic never helped. Calm did. He scanned the concourse again, deliberately this time. Exits, cameras, the security desk near the east wall, a pair of transit officers laughing quietly by a vending machine, unaware of anything unusual. Nothing looked dangerous, which made the feeling in Ethan's chest worse. He followed Rex's line of sight past the girl and her grandmother, past the benches, past the departure boards, until his eyes found the man again. The man by the pillar. He had shifted positions, just slightly. Before, he'd been leaning back, half hidden by shadow. Now he stood straighter, phone lowered, gaze drifting not directly at the girl, but close enough to track her reflection in the glass of the information board. That was when Ethan knew. This wasn't coincidence. The man wasn't watching the crowd. He was watching one small space inside it. Ethan adjusted his stance, angling his body so he could see both the man and the bench without turning his head. He kept his shoulders loose, posture casual. Anyone looking at him would see a tired veteran killing time with his dog, not a man already making calculations. Rex let out another low sound, barely audible, a warning meant only for Ethan. "I see it," Ethan whispered. The girl shifted again. Her grandmother leaned in, brushing invisible lint from the child's sleeve. "You're okay," she said softly. "We're safe here." The girl nodded, but her fingers tightened. Ethan caught the smallest tremor in her hands. That wasn't fatigue. That was fear being held down with everything a child had. Ethan took one slow step forward, not toward the bench, toward the open space between himself and the man. The leash stayed loose. Rex moved with him, perfectly in sync, his head level, his body calm. They didn't rush. They didn't draw attention. They closed distance. The man noticed. His eyes flicked up this time, directly at Rex. For half a second, something passed over his face. Not anger, not surprise. Calculation. He turned away almost immediately, pretending to read the departures board. But his shoulders stiffened, and his weight shifted onto the balls of his feet. Ready to move. Ethan stopped. So did Rex. The space between them hung heavy. Ethan didn't stare. He never stared. He watched reflections, posture, breath. The man's phone was still in his hand, but his thumb wasn't moving. His attention was no longer on the screen. It was on the dog. And that told Ethan everything. People who meant no harm didn't watch dogs like that. Behind them, the girl slid off the bench. Her grandmother stood too, gathering her purse, glancing toward the departure board. "Let's walk a little," she said gently. "Stretch our legs." They started toward the opposite end of the concourse. The man by the pillar moved at the same time, not following directly. He drifted sideways, angling his path so he stayed parallel, always 3 or 4 steps back, always just far enough to look accidental. Rex's breathing deepened. Ethan felt the leash tighten for the first time. Not pulling, just firm. "No," Ethan breathed. "Not yet." He wasn't law enforcement. He had no authority. If he acted too fast, he'd lose the only advantage he had, awareness. He needed confirmation. The girl glanced back, just once. Her eyes met Ethan's. Not his face, but Rex. And again, her hand moved. This time, slower, deliberate. Thumb tucked, fingers extended, wrist angled. The signal was unmistakable. Ethan's jaw clenched. That settled it. Ethan turned, as if distracted by a sound behind him, then changed direction smoothly, cutting across the concourse. Rex followed without a word. Together, they positioned themselves between the man and the girl, far enough not to alarm her grandmother, close enough to matter. The man hesitated. For the first time, his steps broke rhythm. He stopped. So did Ethan. The station noise swelled around them. An announcement crackled over the speakers. A train horn echoed from the distance. Laughter rose and fell. Life continued, blissfully unaware. Rex stood tall now, chest out, ears forward. He didn't bark. He didn't bare his teeth. He simply occupied space. The man took one step to the side. Rex mirrored him. Another step. Rex adjusted again, perfectly. Ethan felt the tension coil tight. The man exhaled sharply through his nose, annoyance flashing across his features before he masked it. He turned, heading toward a side corridor marked, "Authorized personnel only." Too fast, too deliberate. Ethan moved. "Sir," he said calmly, raising his voice just enough to be heard. "You're heading into a restricted area." The man didn't answer. He quickened his pace. Ethan didn't chase. He followed. "Rex," he said, finally giving the command. "With me." The dog moved instantly, no hesitation, no noise. They advanced together, drawing a few curious glances but no panic. Ethan caught the eye of a transit officer near the corridor and gave a short, sharp nod. "Pay attention." The officer frowned, then looked where Ethan was looking, and frowned deeper. The man reached the corridor entrance. He glanced back once more. This time his eyes weren't calm. They were sharp, cornered. Rex growled, loud enough now for others to hear. The sound cut through the station like a blade. The man broke into a run. "Rex, stay close," Ethan said, heart pounding, legs already moving. People shouted. Someone gasped. A suitcase tipped over. The quiet tension of moments ago shattered. Ethan sprinted, every instinct roaring back to life, pain and memory and purpose blurring into one clear line. Ahead, the man disappeared into the corridor. Behind them, the girl screamed. It was the first sound she'd made all night. And Ethan knew, absolutely, unmistakably, whatever came next, there was no turning back. The corridor swallowed sound. The moment Ethan crossed the threshold marked, "Authorized personnel only," the roar of the concourse dulled behind him, replaced by the hollow echo of boots on concrete and the distant hum of machinery. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long, uneven shadows along the narrow hall. Rex surged ahead half a step. Ethan tightened the leash, not to pull him back, but to keep him close. "Easy," he said, low and steady. "Track." Rex's nose dipped, sweeping the air, then angled forward. His ears stayed locked. Whatever scent he'd caught wasn't fading. It was getting stronger. The man had run this way for a reason. Ethan's lungs burned as the familiar rhythm returned. Breathe, scan, move. The years between now and the war thinned until they felt like paper. He hated that feeling, hated how easily it came back. But he didn't stop. Behind them, voices rose. Transit officers shouting, footsteps pounding as backup tried to follow. Ahead, the corridor bent sharply left, then split. Two paths. Ethan slowed just long enough to read the floor. Scuffed marks near the corner, a dropped pamphlet crushed under a hurried heel. "Left," he murmured. Rex didn't hesitate. They turned. The man burst through a maintenance door at the far end, slamming it hard enough to rattle the frame. Ethan caught a glimpse of his face in the harsh light. Jaw tight, eyes wide now, panic bleeding through calculation. "Stop!" Ethan shouted. more to alert others than to convince the man. The door swung closed. Rex lunged. The leash snapped taut, pulling Ethan forward a step before he recovered and followed. The maintenance area opened into a service bay, wider, cluttered with carts, tool racks, and stacked crates. A place meant to confuse pursuit. Smart. Too smart for someone who just wanted to get away. Rex barked once. Short, sharp. The sound cracked through the space like a warning flare. The man stumbled over a cart, swore, and spun around. For the first time, he faced them fully. "Back off!" he snapped, breath ragged. His hands were empty, raised chest high, but his eyes kept darting, measuring distance, exits, angles. Ethan slowed to a stop, planting his feet. "I don't want trouble," he said evenly. "No one here does." The man laughed, a thin, brittle sound. "Then call your dog off," Rex growled, low, controlled. Ethan didn't look at Rex. He trusted him too much to need to. "You need to sit down," Ethan said. "Security's on the way." The man's gaze flicked past Ethan, toward the corridor they'd come from, toward the girl. A flash of something ugly crossed his face. "I wasn't doing anything wrong," he said quickly, too quickly. "I'm allowed to be here." "This area?" Ethan asked. "You're not." The man's jaw worked. His breathing sped. Rex stepped forward half a pace. Ethan felt it, felt the moment tighten like a knot pulled too far. "Rex," he warned softly. "Hold." The dog froze. Muscles coiled. A radio crackled somewhere behind them. Ethan's relief lasted exactly 1 second. The man bolted. Not away, toward Ethan. It happened fast. Too fast for thought. Ethan shoved Rex aside with his leg, instinct screaming. The man barreled past, shoulder clipping Ethan's chest. Ethan staggered but stayed upright, pivoting hard. Rex snapped back into position, barking again, louder now. The man sprinted for a second exit at the far end of the bay, one that led back toward the public platforms. "No," Ethan muttered. If he reached the crowd. Ethan ran. The exit burst open into another passage, narrower still, with exposed pipes along the ceiling and warning signs peeling from the walls. The man was gaining ground. Ethan pushed harder, ignoring the ache in his knees, the burn in his lungs. "Rex, go wide!" he shouted. The German shepherd veered, cutting a clean angle, forcing the man to adjust his path. For a moment, it worked. The man hesitated, glancing over his shoulder. That hesitation cost him. He slipped on an oil-stained patch of floor, stumbled, and slammed into the wall. Rex closed the distance in 2 powerful strides. "Rex, stay!" Ethan commanded, voice sharp now. The dog skidded to a stop, teeth bared but body restrained, standing between the man and the corridor beyond. The man pressed his back to the wall, hands up again. "Get him back!" he shouted. "Get that thing away from me!" Ethan slowed, breath heaving, vision narrowing. "You're done," he said. "Sit down. Hands where I can see them." The man shook his head violently. "You don't understand." "I understand enough," Ethan replied. Behind him, hurried footsteps echoed. Security, maybe police. Help was close. The man's eyes flicked again toward the public side, toward where the girl and her grandmother waited. His hand dropped. Ethan saw it. Too late. The man reached inside his jacket. Everything snapped into a single terrible clarity. "Rex, down!" Ethan yelled. A deafening crack split the corridor. Pain punched through Ethan's side like a sledgehammer. The force spun him off his feet. He hit the floor hard, The breath ripped from his lungs. For a moment, the world shrank to noise and light, and the metallic taste flooding his mouth. He heard Rex before he saw him. The German shepherd roared, no longer restrained, no longer silent. Rex launched forward, placing himself squarely between Ethan and the man, barking with a fury that shook the walls. Ethan tried to push himself up. His arm wouldn't cooperate. "Rex," he gasped, "stay with me." Rex didn't look back. He stood over Ethan now, broad shoulders blocking the corridor, teeth bared, eyes blazing. The man stumbled backward, shock and fear tearing through his earlier confidence. "Drop it!" someone shouted from behind. More footsteps, commands, chaos. The man hesitated, then turned to run again. Rex surged forward, not to attack, but to drive him back, forcing space, buying time. Ethan lay on the cold concrete, pain blooming hot and heavy, but his eyes stayed locked on Rex, on his partner. On the line, Rex refused to let anyone cross. In the distance, a child's voice carried through the corridor. High, frightened, unmistakable. Ethan closed his eyes for a split second. Hold the line, he thought. Just hold the line. And Rex did. Ethan drifted in and out of awareness. The floor beneath him felt impossibly cold, as if the concrete were pulling heat straight from his body. Sounds came in fragments. Boots pounding, voices shouting, the sharp echo of commands ricocheting down the narrow corridor. But through it all, one sound stayed clear. Rex. The German shepherd stood planted over Ethan's body, legs spread, shoulders squared, every muscle locked. His bark wasn't wild or panicked. It was measured, controlled, a warning drawn from deep in his chest, repeated again and again. This line does not move. Ethan tried to speak. His mouth opened, but only a thin breath escaped. Pain pulsed from his side in slow, heavy waves. Not blinding, not yet. The kind that told him something was wrong, but survivable if he stayed awake. "Rex," he whispered. The dog's ears flicked back for half a second, just enough to acknowledge him. Rex didn't turn around. He didn't step away. He stayed. The man staggered backward, eyes wide, face drained of color. The weapon clattered from his hand and skidded across the floor, spinning to a stop near the wall. He raised his palms, breath hitching, trapped by the wall behind him and the dog in front of him. "I didn't mean," he started. "Down!" a voice barked from behind Rex. Transit officers flooded the corridor, weapons raised but cautious, spacing themselves carefully. One of them glanced at Ethan on the ground, then back at Rex. "Easy, easy," the officer said, voice steady. "Good dog." Rex didn't move, not until Ethan felt a gloved hand on his shoulder. "Sir, stay with me," someone said. "Help's coming." Ethan forced his eyes open. A young officer knelt beside him, eyes sharp with concern. "You've been hit," she said. "Don't try to move." "I know," Ethan muttered. His fingers twitched, searching for the leash. Rex felt it instantly. The dog stepped back just enough to place his head near Ethan's chest, pressing close, grounding him. Only then did Rex allow the officers to pass, just enough to secure the man and pull him away from the corridor. Metal cuffs clicked. The threat was contained, but Rex didn't relax. A stretcher rattled down the hall moments later, wheels squealing softly. Paramedics moved fast, voices clipped and efficient. "Sir, I'm going to cut your jacket," one said. "Don't," Ethan said through clenched teeth. "It's fine." The medic paused, then nodded. "All right, pressure first." hands pressed firm against Ethan's side. The pain sharpened, dragging a groan from his throat despite his effort to swallow it back. Rex whined softly. "I'm here," Ethan breathed. "You did good." The dog's tail gave a single, slow thump against the floor. As they lifted Ethan onto the stretcher, Rex refused to step away. He paced tight circles, nose brushing Ethan's hand, eyes flicking to every movement around them. "He won't let us move," a medic said quietly. Ethan swallowed and lifted his hand weakly. "Rex, heal." The command was barely more than a breath. Rex froze. His ears flattened. His body trembled, not with fear, but conflict. Then, slowly, painfully, he stepped back half a pace. The medic exhaled. "Thank you." They began rolling Ethan back toward the concourse. The station looked different from the stretcher. Lights too bright. Ceilings too high. Faces blurred together as they passed. People stood frozen at the edges, murmuring, eyes wide, trying to understand what they'd almost witnessed. And then Ethan heard her. "Is he going to die?" The voice was small, fragile, broken by fear. The stretcher stopped. Ethan turned his head just enough to see Lily standing near the security barrier, clutching her grandmother's coat. Her face was pale now, tears streaking down her cheeks. The grandmother knelt beside her, arms tight around the child's shoulders, shaking as she tried to stay composed. Ethan forced a smile that felt heavier than his gear ever had. "No," he said softly. "I'm not going anywhere." Lily stared at him, eyes huge. "He fell because of me," she whispered. Rex immediately pulled against the leash, whining, desperate to reach her. One of the officers loosened his grip, allowing Rex to move closer, but not too close. The dog sat in front of Lily, lowering his head until his eyes were level with hers. Lily hesitated, then slowly raised her hand. Not the signal this time, just a gentle touch. Her fingers brushed Rex's fur. "He heard me," she said through tears. "I didn't say anything, but he heard me." Ethan's chest tightened. "Yes," he said quietly. "He did." Lily looked at him again. "I was scared to talk. He said something bad would happen if I did." The grandmother gasped softly, pulling Lily closer. Ethan closed his eyes for a second, then opened them again. "You did the right thing," he said. "You were brave." Lily shook her head. "I wasn't brave." Rex leaned into her touch. Ethan watched the moment through a haze of pain and relief. "Sometimes," he said, voice rough, "being quiet is the bravest thing there is." The paramedic touched his shoulder. "We need to go." Ethan nodded. As the stretcher rolled away, Rex walked beside it, refusing to fall back. Lily watched until they disappeared through the doors, her small hand still resting against her grandmother's coat. For the first time since the night began, the station breathed again. But for Ethan, the hardest part was still ahead. The hospital never truly went quiet. Even past midnight, it breathed with the steady rhythm of machines, murmured voices, and footsteps moving with purpose down polished halls. Fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead, casting everything in a pale, sleepless glow. Ethan woke to that sound. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. White ceiling, beeping monitor, the faint smell of antiseptic. His body felt heavy, distant, as if it belonged to someone else. Then the pain reached him. A deep, burning ache wrapped around his side, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. Ethan exhaled slowly, teeth clenched, forcing himself not to move too quickly. "Easy," a voice said. He turned his head. A nurse stood near the foot of the bed, tablet tucked under one arm. "You're awake," she said, offering a small, reassuring smile. That's good. You gave us a scare. How bad? Ethan asked. Not as bad as it could have been, she replied honestly. The bullet passed clean. You lost blood, but you're stable. You're lucky. Ethan gave a faint, humorless breath. I don't believe in lucky. The nurse glanced toward the door. Your dog does. Ethan followed her gaze. Rex lay just outside the glass partition, head resting on his paws, body angled toward the bed. He hadn't slept. His eyes lifted the instant Ethan stirred, ears twitching, tail thumping once, hard enough to tap against the floor. Ethan's throat tightened. Hey, he whispered. Rex stood immediately, pressing his nose to the glass, breath fogging it slightly. He didn't whine, he didn't bark, he just watched. Later, when the pain meds dulled the sharpest edges, a man in a dark jacket stepped quietly into the room. He introduced himself as a transit investigator, voice low, respectful. We've got the suspect in custody, he said. No one else was hurt. Ethan nodded. The girl? She's safe, the man replied. So is her grandmother. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Good. The investigator hesitated. She wanted to see you. Ethan opened his eyes. Now? She's been asking since you arrived. Ethan looked down at the wires, the bandages, the IV taped to his arm. Then he glanced toward Rex. Let her in. Lily entered the room slowly, holding her grandmother's hand like an anchor. The hospital gown swallowed her small frame. Her yellow sweater folded neatly over her arm. Her eyes went first to Ethan, then to Rex. Rex stood the moment she stepped inside. He walked to her without being called, lowering himself carefully until he sat in front of her, calm and steady. Lily smiled for the first time that night. You're okay, she whispered to him. Rex's tail wagged once. The grandmother cleared her throat, eyes shining. We just wanted to thank you, she said softly. Both of you. Ethan shifted slightly, wincing. You don't owe me anything. Lily stepped closer to the bed, fingers twisting together. I didn't know what else to do, she said. I couldn't talk. Ethan met her gaze. You did exactly what you should have. She frowned. But you got hurt. That wasn't your fault, he said gently. Sometimes grown-ups choose to stand in the way so kids don't have to. She considered that. Then she nodded. My teacher taught us the signal, Lily said quietly. She said if someone ever made me feel scared, and I couldn't say why, I should do this. Her hand moved, slow and careful, repeating the gesture. Ethan recognized it again, and felt the weight of it settle deeper this time. You remembered, he said. And Rex saw it, Lily added, glancing at the dog. He looked at me like he knew. Ethan smiled faintly. He did. When Lily and her grandmother left, the room felt emptier. The night stretched long. Ethan drifted in and out of sleep, memories slipping between past and present. Desert heat, radio static, the sound of boots on gravel. And always, always, Rex beside him, silent and steady. Just before dawn, Ethan woke again. Rex lay at the foot of the bed now, finally resting, eyes closed but ears still alert. One paw twitched as if he were running somewhere Ethan couldn't see. Ethan reached down and brushed his fingers against Rex's fur. Still here, he murmured. Rex opened one eye, then the other. The first light of morning crept through the window, pale and fragile. For the first time in a long while, Ethan let himself believe that the night had ended. Morning came quietly. A thin line of pale sunlight slipped through the blinds, cutting across the hospital room and settling on the floor like something fragile and unsure of itself. The night had finally loosened its grip, but it hadn't let go completely. Ethan was awake. He lay still, listening to the slow, steady beeping of the monitor beside him. His body ached in a dull, constant way. Not the sharp pain of moments after being hit, but the deep reminder that something had passed through him and left a mark behind. Some wounds stayed longer than others. Rex sat near the window, watching the world outside as if guarding it. When Ethan shifted, the dog turned immediately, ears lifting, eyes alert. "I'm not going anywhere," Ethan murmured. Rex's tail thumped once. There was a soft knock at the door. This time, it wasn't a nurse. The transit investigator stepped in again, joined by a woman in plain clothes. She carried herself with a quiet authority that Ethan recognized instantly. Not military, not aggressive, just practiced. "Mr. Walker," she said, "I'm Detective Harris. We were hoping to ask you a few questions, if you're up for it." Ethan nodded. "So go ahead." She glanced at Rex. "Is he all right to stay?" "He's not leaving," Ethan replied. The detective accepted that without argument. "The man we detained," Harris began, "his name is Gavin Cole. No active warrants, but a long history of reports that never quite rose to the level of arrest. Harassment, stalking, fixation." Ethan's jaw tightened. "He wasn't after the child," Harris continued. "Not originally." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. "He was after the grandmother," he said. Harris paused, then nodded slowly. "You already know." "She knew it too," Ethan said. "She just didn't want to remember." Later that morning, the door opened again. This time, Lily and her grandmother stepped inside. The grandmother looked different in daylight. Smaller somehow. The strength she'd held onto all night now showed thin cracks, like glass under pressure. She took a seat slowly, hands folded tightly in her lap. "I should have told someone," she said, voice trembling before anyone asked a question. "Years ago. I thought if I stayed quiet long enough, it would go away." Lily stood close to her, one hand gripping her coat. Ethan listened without interrupting. "When I was young," the woman continued, "there was a man who became obsessed. He followed me, watched me, wrote letters. I moved towns, changed jobs. I thought I'd outrun him." Her voice broke. "I was wrong." She looked at Lily then, tears spilling freely now. "When I saw him at the bus stop yesterday, I felt it immediately. That same fear. I didn't want to scare her, so I pretended everything was fine." Lily looked up at her. "But you were shaking." The grandmother nodded. "I was." Ethan felt something heavy settle in his chest. Not anger, not blame. Recognition. Fear had a way of teaching silence. "He followed us all the way here," Lily said quietly. "I didn't know what to do. I remembered the signal." "You saved both of you," Ethan said. Lily shook her head. "Rex did." Rex lifted his head at the sound of his name. The detective cleared her throat. "Mr. Cole admitted to following you," she said to the grandmother. "He claims he just wanted to talk." Ethan's eyes hardened. People who just want to talk don't chase kids through stations. Harris nodded. "Agreed. He'll be held on multiple charges. Restraining orders will be put in place." The grandmother exhaled shakily, like she'd been holding her breath for decades. After they left, the room felt quiet again, but different now, lighter somehow. Ethan stared at the ceiling. "I didn't want to get involved," he said aloud. Rex shifted closer, pressing his shoulder gently against the bed. "I know," Ethan whispered. "Me neither." But deep down, he knew the truth. Some battles didn't ask permission. They waited. And when they came back, they chose their moment carefully. Outside the window, the city moved on. Trains arrived. Trains departed. People lived their lives, unaware of how close fear had come to standing beside them. Ethan closed his eyes. The story wasn't over yet, but the silence had finally been broken. Ethan thought the worst was behind them. The doctors said he would recover. The detectives said the man was in custody. The grandmother said she finally felt safe enough to breathe. And yet, Rex wouldn't rest. It was late afternoon when Ethan noticed it. The hospital room had settled into that dull, in-between quiet. Shift change approaching, voices low, footsteps measured. Sunlight slanted through the blinds, turning dust in the air into drifting sparks. Rex stood at the window, unmoving, not sleeping, not pacing, watching. "Rex?" Ethan said softly. The dog's ears twitched, but he didn't turn around. His body was tense in a way Ethan recognized instantly. Not alarm, not aggression, anticipation. Ethan's fingers tightened against the bedsheet. "What do you see, buddy?" Before Rex could respond, the door opened. A uniformed officer stepped in, face tight, radio crackling faintly at his shoulder. "Mr. Walker," he said, voice careful, "we need to move you." Ethan's stomach dropped. "Why?" The officer hesitated. "There's been a complication." It happened fast after that. Too fast. Orderlies rolled in equipment. Nurses unplugged monitors with practiced efficiency. Ethan was transferred to a wheelchair, his side screaming in protest as he clenched his jaw and breathed through it. Rex stayed pressed against his knee the entire time. As they moved into the hallway, the noise rose, sharper now. Not panic, but urgency. Radios murmured. Doors opened and closed too quickly. Ethan caught fragments. "Transport delay. Visitor corridor. Not supposed to be there." "Where's the girl?" Ethan asked suddenly. The officer pushing him didn't answer right away. Then, with her grandmother, security escort. Rex growled, low, unmistakable. Ethan felt it in his bones. "That's not good enough," he said. They reached a junction near the visitor elevators when everything went wrong. A shout echoed from down the hall. Then another. Someone screamed. Rex lunged. The leash tore free from the officer's grip as the German shepherd surged forward, barking once, deep, thunderous, shaking the sterile walls. Ethan twisted in the chair. "Rex!" Too late. At the far end of the corridor, a familiar figure broke into view. Gavin Cole. Unrestrained. His eyes were wild now, stripped of the hollow calm he'd worn at the station. One hand clutched a nurse's wrist, not hurting her, just holding on long enough to block pursuit. And behind him, Lily. Her face had gone completely white. Ethan's blood ran cold. "He's not supposed to be here," someone shouted. "He slipped transport," another voice yelled. Gavin's gaze locked onto Ethan. A twisted smile crept across his face. "You don't get to decide how this ends," he said. Rex planted himself between them instantly, teeth bared, body rigid like a wall of living steel. Lily made the signal. This time, she didn't hide it. Her small hand trembled as her fingers moved. Clear, deliberate, desperate. Rex responded with a snarl that echoed down the corridor. "Let her go," Ethan said, forcing himself to stand. Pain tore through him, white and blinding. But he didn't stop. He leaned on the chair for balance, every muscle screaming as he stepped forward. Gavin laughed. "You already played hero once." Rex advanced one step. Gavin's grip loosened, not because he wanted it to, but because fear finally cracked through his obsession. Security flooded in from both ends of the hall, forming a closing arc. "Sir, release the child," a voice commanded. Gavin's eyes darted, calculating, trapped. Rex moved again, not attacking, blocking, cutting off every path except one, away from Lily. That was the moment Lily slipped free. She ran, straight to Ethan. Ethan dropped to one knee just in time to catch her, wrapping one arm around her shoulders as she buried her face against his chest. Rex roared. Gavin panicked. He turned, too late. Security tackled him to the floor, pinning his arms, voices shouting commands as cuffs snapped shut. The corridor fell silent. Ethan sank back into the wheelchair, breath ragged, heart hammering. Lily clung to him, shaking. "I thought," she whispered. "I thought he'd come back." Ethan closed his eyes briefly. "You did the right thing again." Rex returned to Ethan's side, standing guard, chest heaving, eyes never leaving the restrained man. Gavin was dragged past them, still shouting, still insisting the past owed him something. Ethan didn't look at him. He looked at Rex, at Lily, at the grandmother, who had collapsed into a chair down the hall, sobbing openly now. Years of fear finally breaking apart. This wasn't over because someone had been brave once. It was over because bravery had been repeated, and because silence, when it finally broke, had been heard. The hallway didn't erupt in cheers. It didn't need to. When Gavin Cole was finally taken away, hands cuffed, head lowered, his voice fading into the distance, the hospital seemed to exhale as one body. Doors closed softly. Radios quieted. The ordinary rhythm returned, fragile but real. Ethan sat in the wheelchair, exhaustion settling into his bones like wet sand. Lily stayed close. Her small hands knotted into the fabric of his jacket, as if letting go might make the night start all over again. Rex stood guard, not pacing, not restless. Just there, solid, watchful, unmovable. The grandmother approached slowly, eyes red, face lined with a relief so deep it hurt to see. She knelt in front of Lily and wrapped her in both arms, holding her the way she should have been held years ago, when fear first learned her name. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I didn't say anything sooner." Lily shook her head against her shoulder. "You tried to keep me safe." The grandmother looked up at Ethan then, voice trembling. "You saved us." Ethan met her gaze, steady and quiet. "No," he said. "She did." He nodded toward Lily. "And he listened," Lily added softly, looking at Rex. Rex's tail thumped once against the floor. Ethan was returned to his room later that evening. Doctors spoke of recovery timelines and follow-up visits, but their words drifted past him like distant weather. What mattered was that the pain had softened, and that Rex lay at the foot of his bed, finally allowing his eyes to close. For the first time since the station, Rex slept. Ethan watched him for a long moment, then looked down at his own hands. They trembled faintly, not from fear, not from pain, but from something else. Release. He had spent years avoiding moments like this, Moments where responsibility arrived uninvited. Moments where doing nothing wasn't an option. War had taught him how to react. Life had taught him how to stay quiet. Tonight had demanded both. Just before dawn, Lily returned one last time. She stood at the door, hesitant, then walked in with purpose beyond her years. Rex stirred immediately, lifting his head. She approached the bed and raised her hand. Slowly, carefully. She made the signal again. Not because she was afraid, but because she wanted to be understood. Ethan smiled. "I see you." Rex stood, stepped closer, and responded with a soft whine, gentle, almost musical. Lily lowered her hand and smiled through tears. "Thank you," she whispered, "for hearing me when I couldn't talk." Rex leaned in, pressing his forehead lightly against her arm. A promise. A memory. Something she would carry long after the fear faded. When the sun finally rose over Harbor Point, Ethan felt something shift inside him. Not closure, something quieter. He knew he would heal, slowly. He knew Rex would stay by his side, just as he always had. And he knew Lily would grow up knowing that silence wasn't weakness, that sometimes it was a language only the right ones could hear. Ethan lay back, eyes closing, the steady weight of Rex's presence grounding him. He hadn't gone looking for trouble, but when it came, he listened. And because he did, everything changed.